return of Super 35 through this new Arri camera, which, as you know, is a spectacular looking camera. What is that going to do for us lens-wise, you think?
I think it opens the world. So as we moved into larger and larger sensors as a trend, that limited the options for lenses, right? So we can't work with Super 35. We can't work with vintage glass that was designed for Academy. We have to go to still lenses or new lenses designed for full frame. Now that there's a reinvigorated interest in Super 35, for which there was a standard for 5 decades now, that opens this world back up to being able to use older glass again and being able to have a larger breadth of options. And there's nothing wrong with utilizing a lens designed for a full frame camera on a Super 35 camera. So it just creates more options. I think it's a plus for old guys like us. It's what we grew up with, right? So it's the look that we know. We know a Super 35 look a lot better.
I always refer back to a Super 35 equivalent when you're talking about a focal length, because what is this field of view I'm going to be looking at? Well, on 65 mil, this is going to be like a 35 mil on Super 35. I always have to have that little caveat. There was a great sort of double-blind study film that they did with the AFC and Denis Lenoir, where they didn't tell you what the lenses were, and you had to look at all these different images and juxtapose and sort of try to predict what you liked and and think what the lens family was. And it was actually shocking what their conception and what their presuppositions of what they thought a certain lens family should look like and what came out of it. And the point of all that is that there is some legacy Super 35 glass there that was universally sort of like everyone just loved. And have that be sort of re-acknowledged now because it's a viable format again is great, because there's some really striking glass out there was created.
On that new camera, which has an extended range with another 3 stops, especially in the highlights, what will that do to optics?
My sort of mandate of harnessing all that information by having more nuance in sort of the that clip register, the flare, the veiling glare, and really defining that and capturing that you could then, in terms of color correction and that sort of stuff, you can manipulate that. You have that data there. So I'm always trying to protect that information, and that goes into sort of my complete rant on how I view capture digital exposure techniques and stuff. I'm sort of like verboten on like the trend of like underexposing to get like a digital grain, because that doesn't exist. It's fixed pattern noise, and that's never your friend. And lack of actual digital encoding in terms of bit depth, it means that you just don't have any sort of data to then manipulate later. When you have the most problems with chromatic aberration, it's with those extremes of contrast, where you have a tree branch and a really hot sky, and that's really showing the chromatic aberration. And so now you're able to nuance that chromatic aberration even more, because you're really sort of capturing that. You may start to expose some more limitations. Maybe not in a good way, so you have to really sort of test for that and get an understanding of how your camera lens combination exposure plays into that. Maybe something you would miss on the full frame is just how you can harness different sort of format depth of field cues, because you can have a wider lens that still has a depth of field fall off with a larger taking format. Other than that, like, the push for the Alexa 4K was just to be able to get accepted on Netflix, right? Because of the resolution requirements. With the Super 35 version of that, like, you don't have to have the larger gate size, you still have the resolution requirement. So then, do we need to have all this hubbub and dealing with maybe too shallow a focus? That's one of the funny trade-offs when you get to full frame. It's kind of like you have these properties of a little bit larger format and depth of field you can play with a little bit more. And then when you go to 65, it kind of goes too far, and now you're battling the format. You're having to stop down because it's too mushy. And so it's like, I don't really want to have to light this to a 4, but it's called just a big bloom of out of focus gauze back there, and I can't tell what. Maybe I want to know that there's a person approaching in the background and being able to feel them. So then you start to battle the format. And for me, that's why full frame was kind of like a sweet spot. It's like on the other side, 16 millimeter, everything was too much in focus, and you really wanted to have a little bit of depth of field fall off. So we would do things like shoot the wide shot, and you see the room, you feel like the depth cues are kind of locked because you see everything. But as soon as you go into the mediums, take the sofa and pull it another foot away from the back wall, so I can cheat and have that fall off happen more. And then you get it longer and pull it even a little bit further and try to make it feel more like 35 mil in its depth of field. Those techniques, so you're battling the 16 versus the 65, and the 35 was kind of like, It's like the Goldilocks of all of this.